Our lesson title for today is Solutions of Inequalities. We have 3 learning targets. I can explain what it means for a number to be a solution to an inequality. I can determine if a particular number is a solution to an inequality, and I can graph the solutions to an inequality on a number line. So our first activity, unknowns on a number line. So the number line shows several points, each labeled with a letter. Fill in each blank with a letter so that the inequality statements are true. So right now, if you want to pause this video and complete this yourself, go ahead and then you can resume to check. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points on this. So there are a lot of different options for number one. So here I can see a greater than symbol. Here I can see a less than. So for the greater than, I need to choose any point other than A, because A isn't greater than anything. It's the smallest number on here because it's the furthest to the left. So how about I just do B is greater than A, because B is to the right of A, meaning it is greater. And then I can just switch them for the other one, right? A is less than B, because A is to the left of B. So, perfect. And now Jada says that she found 3 different ways to complete the first question correctly. Do you think it's possible? Explain your reasoning. So, what do you think? Once again, pause the video and go ahead and answer that question and then resume. So, Jada is correct. There are 6 points. So there are numerous, meaning many, inequalities one could write. So some other ones we could write. B is less than C, because it's to the left of C. C is less than D. D is less than E, right? And E is less than F. And then we could flip all of these if we wanted. We could do C is greater than B, D is greater than C, so on and so forth. So we can always, there's many different comparisons we could make here. And for number 3, list a possible value for each letter on the number line based on its location. So looking here, I'm going to start with the point closest to 0. I see D is 0. So I'm going to start there. And let's say C is, it's to the left, so it's negative. And I'm going to say that's negative 2. So negative 1 would be right here, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. Let's say B is negative 5. Okay. And then A looks like it's a little bit more than twice as far to the left as B. So we can say that's about negative 11. E looks like it's the opposite of B. It looks like they're both equally far away from 0. So if B is negative 5, then E would be positive 5. And F doesn't look quite as far away as A, so let's say that's positive 8. Right, so once again, you could count, you could put a lot of different imaginary values here. So there are a lot of different answers you could have. But here's one example. So now let's get started on the next page. So amusement park rides. Priya finds these height requirements for some of the rides at an amusement park. So go ahead and read those over. To ride the high bounce, you need to be between 55 and 72 inches tall. The Climathon, under 60 inches tall. And the Twirl-A-Coaster, 58 inches minimum. So thinking about ride requirements is a really nice way to think of inequalities. If you've ever been to Cedar Point, you see these at the front of every line that you go on, where it always says you must be at least this tall to ride this ride. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. And we need to write an inequality for each one of these height requirements using the variable h for the unknown height. And then we need to represent each height requirement on a number line. Okay, so obviously on Wiser Me, you guys can't actually graph the number line. I still left them on here so you can watch me do it. But you guys can still type in the inequalities. So let's start with the high bounce. So the high bounce means we need to be between 55 and 72. Okay, so between 55 and 72. So I can see from 55 to 72, it's going up. So that means h must be greater than 55. And between 55 and 72, and 55 is less than 72, so I'm going to say, and h is less than 72. So it's in between those two. Another thing to think about here is whether or not we include these points. Like, how do you read this? Between 55 and 72? Does that mean you could be 55? If so, then you would also add these little lines beneath, which means h is greater than or equal to 55, and h is less than or equal to 72. So then you could be 55 inches tall, or 72 inches tall, or anything in between. Anything less than this is too short. Anything more than this is too tall. And so now we have our number line. It doesn't have any numbers on it, so we actually have to add those in ourselves. Let's say I don't want to number each of these. I don't have enough spaces to go from 55 to 72. So let's have these just count by fives, let's say. So I'm going to start here, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75. So I actually could have used a little bit more space here, but that's okay. So now to graph my number line. So h, whatever line you draw, that's what represents the possible values for your variable. Okay. So for this, h is greater than or equal to 55. So I'm going to put a closed circle on 55 because 55 is a possible height. And I'm going to go up. And I'm going to stop at 72, which would be in between 70 and 75, a little bit less than halfway. So this represents h. So this number line right here represents all of the possible heights you could be and still ride the high bounce. So you could be 60 inches tall, you could be 65 inches tall, couldn't be 75 inches tall. That's out of the range of the possible heights. Okay, that's kind of what we're looking at. Climathon is a little bit easier. It simply says under 60 inches tall. So we have our height, and it's under, so that means less than 60. And under 60 inches tall, does that include 60? Doesn't sound like it. It's just less than 60. So once again here, we'll count by fives. We'll start here at, let's do 40 this time, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70. All right, and h is less than 60. So I'm going to start at 60, and I'm going to go to the left, so counting down. And notice here, it's a little bit different. So here, I actually filled in those circles, those points, because I was saying 55 and 72 could be answers. Those are appropriate heights you could be and still ride the ride. Whereas for the Climathon, you must be under 60 inches. So 60 inches is not an acceptable height. It is too tall. So that means we had to do an open circle. So you can be just under 60. You could be 59.9999999 inches, but you cannot be 60 inches. So over to the side, just a little note. A closed circle means greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. The open circle is just greater than or less than. That means you cannot actually be the value you start at. You can be just under it. And now for the twirler coaster, 58 inches minimum. Okay, minimum. What does that mean? So if I say you need to spend a minimum of 30 minutes a night doing homework, what does that mean? A minimum of 30 minutes a night. That means you have to do 30 or more. So when you see the word minimum, that actually means greater than or equal to. So the possible height for this one is 58 or more. Your height can be equal to 58 or higher. So once again, start at 40. $65, $70. And so we could be at 58, or we could be anything more. Once again, these lines represent the possibilities, possible values for h, for our variable, our possible heights. Another thing that's really important to note here, if you ever see this arrow in math, that means it goes on for infinity, right? So arrows equal infinity. So in theory, on a ride, is there anyone who's actually 1,000 inches tall? Absolutely not. But from this statement, really 58 inches minimum, technically, if you were 1,000 inches tall, you could still ride the ride based on that rule, right? So that's what we graph. Obviously, that's a little bit ridiculous in the actual situation, but that is what that means, 58 inches minimum. So important to know whenever you see an arrow, if it's just saying minimum, it technically goes on for infinity, and that's our infinity symbol, kind of sideways 8. All right, so Han's cousin is 55 inches tall. Han doesn't think she is tall enough to ride the high bounce, but Karan believes that she is tall enough. Do you agree with Han or Karan? Be prepared to explain your reasoning. So looking up here, the high bounce says in between 55 and 72. We touched on this a little bit before. Does between 55 and 72 include these measurements? It's up for debate. I think you could make an argument either way. I would think it kind of does. You know, if you were 55 and 1/10 of an inch, you know, I think you could ride the ride. So I would say, but Karan believes that she is tall enough. I would say I agree with Karan. I read the phrase between as including the endpoints. However, you could make an argument either way. Okay, on the next page, Priya can ride the Climathon, but she cannot ride the high bounce or twirler coaster. Which, if any of the following, could be Priya's height? Be prepared to explain your reasoning. So she can ride the Climathon, but she cannot ride the others. Okay? So the Climathon, you need to be less than 60. Okay? So, less than 60. So would 59 work? Well, if she was 59, then she could technically ride the high bounce, because the high bounce is in between 55 and 72, so that doesn't work. And the twirler coaster says you could be greater than 58. So if she was 59 inches, she would actually be able to ride all of those. So looks like it's got to be less than all of those. And 53 would actually be the only answer. Because if we look at our three inequalities, 53 is less than 60. So the Climathon is h is less than 60, and 53 is less than 60. So it works, and it is the only height that works for the Climathon, but is too short for the other rides. Okay, I'm going to have to pause the video here. Make sure you have all your notes there, and then be sure to watch part 2 to fill out the rest of this note packet.